Welcome to this week's edition of the Belau Report. I'm Jane Belau. We have two members of the council who have not served before, Patrick Keene and Shaun Palmer. Patrick can't be with us today, but we have Shaun, and we're going to question him about some really important issues. And first of all, what was the biggest surprise that you had when you started working as a council member? You know, you always have to look at it and think, boy, if I was on the city council, I'd be doing this. What was your biggest surprise?
First of all, I was, I think, well prepared because I had run before. And so I've watched politics probably since I was in 6th grade. So it doesn't really surprise me. And being a former city employee, I was a city employee and retired after 25 and a half years. I knew how the city pretty much ran. What really kind of surprised me is I used to be, I'm past president of Camp Olson Board. And how that board and that experience working with the different board members, how that played so well into the city council so far as doing budgets and long-range planning and being successful. And that really, a lot of the things I learned on that board really have helped me with my city council experience so far.
Okay. What has been the biggest issue that you have taken a stand on so far?
Well, I think the biggest issue to my ward is the North Broadway project, and they brought out the assessments on that. It was designed about a year and a half ago, and they've been going through it, and we did the assessments on it. And the assessments came up really high. We had businesses that had $80,000 worth of assessment. And the state law is that the city has to prove that we increased your value of your property by X amount. And I would say, in the advice that we've gotten, that $80,000 will probably be about a $15,000 bill. So I've had a lot of businesses on North Broadway, and a lot of people saying, wow, you know, $15,000 is fair, $80,000 was outrageous. Now we have to figure out where we're going to come up with that downfall in the money. We do have turn back money from the state of Minnesota in North Broadway, and there's a pot of money sitting there for that. And we've redesigned the project a little bit, but that was probably the biggest issue we've had so far. Mayo Civic Center is another issue that's been big that we've worked on, and the Chateau Theater is another one.
As we talk today, the state legislature hasn't decided what they're going to do on local government aids to cities. What should they do?
Well, it should be fair, and that system has never been really fair to Rochester. It's kind of weighted to how many houses you had built in the 1930s and your size of your population. You know, Rochester's a city of the first class, and we're over 107,000 people. But the state changed the rule. They said that at any time that you have been 100,000, you always will be a city of the first class. So they brought Duluth still in there. Because Duluth used to be about 130,000. Now they're dwindled to about 75,000 people. But they're still considered a city of the first class.
They can't do that, can they?
The state legislative people can do almost anything they want. And the
Okay.
poor city government has to follow their rules.
Isn't that fascinating? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm never too old to learn. All right. You, all by yourself, opposed the Chateau project that they approved recently. There's a lot of feeling in the community about what the Chateau should be doing, and they're not sure about the action that the council took. Tell us why you did not vote for that.
Well, let's start out with, first of all, I love the Chateau. I was a child and I went there and watched Mary Poppins, so I love it. And I also said, I heard Mayor Brady say that, you know, before they tore it down, he would chain himself to the front door, and I'd chain myself to the front door. No one's going to tear it down. My idea, and I talked to a lot of citizens who thought it would be a good idea, since the castle was sold, and there was 3 different people who wanted to buy that. And I don't know if you visited the castle, but they've done a beautiful job in there, and I was so impressed with that building. I thought, at least look at selling the building and let private people get it. And when we go to federal tax credits to fix up that building, we're going to have it be a private owner own that building. So let's look at it and see if we can do that. I saw all 3 presentations, and all 3 were good. But I saw all 3 of them being placed somewhere in our community. I mean, one of them could have used the Civic Center, one of them could have used Civic Theater, one of them could have used the Arts Center as bringing museum stuff in. And I thought that they didn't really add anything to the Chateau. And so, you know, I was a lone vote. I had probably 10 to 1 support and emails and text messages and phone calls. And that's how you learn from different people. People in favor of selling it, or at least looking at selling it.
Well, tell our viewers the pros and cons of the one they did vote for, 6-1.
Well, I think the pros to it is that it's something that's going to be open all the time, something that people can come in, and we were talking earlier about the History Museum for Rochester or Rumson County was downtown. And you know, when you're a patient and you have to kill some time, you don't know what to do, you could go look at that museum piece and it'll be open. So that I think was more easier for people to go with on that kind of a thought. I don't think people understood that they're probably only going to have 2 or 3 exhibits a year. So how often are regular people going to go, are regular citizens going to go? The other thing I don't think people understood was that the heart of the city, which we just are getting ready to approve, is going to be under construction for 2 years. And so that's going to be difficult for people to get into the chateau, and there's going to be some work that's going to have to be done for that.
And all 3 of the projects wanted more city investment? Is it going to become like I-25 Live and a permanent part of the budget going forward, or what?
Well, in part of the fears, and if you look at back in the history on this project, the estimate was $800,000 of subsidy for that building for Rochester. And that's a lot of money. Right now we subsidize the Arts Center by $400,000. And they only have 40,000 visitors. That's $10 per person who visits. Our golf courses are subsidized about $2 per person, and our pools are subsidized by $5. Nothing wrong with subsidizing something. It gives you that feeling of a good community, and that's what you want, is a quality of life. But you have to look at what you're subsidizing and who's paying for that. And the regular person's paying for that. And that's one of the things that I've really been proud of is fight for the little guy in this and being on the council.
You mentioned the Mayo Civic Auditorium as one of the issues you wanted to talk about today. Tell us about that.
Well, it's been interesting to watch going from publicly owned, you know, we've run it, they've been our employees, to having the proposal that it's going to be run by an outside firm. We have 4 firms right now that are looking at it, and we just went through an interview process, I should say the city administrator did and the city attorney did, of I believe it was 17 different people, and they picked 5 people to be on their board. And they're going to consolidate the experienced Rochester people. They're going to put in the Mayo Civic Center people. And it should save the citizens of Rochester about $1 million a year. But the bigger thing is it's going to increase the use of it and have an outside firm come in and be able to run our auditorium with other auditoriums.
And lots of local places like to use it, but it's priced out of their reach. Say the Rotary clubs and the service clubs and some of the things. Are they going to do something about that?
I think they are. You know, you have to remember it's not a community center. It's a convention center. It's set up a little bit differently. 125 Live is an area that you can use as a community center. But as a council, we want it to be more used. You know, when people drive by at night and see it empty, that's not what we want. And so we do want to have other groups in there. But it is set up, you know, for conventions. It's set up for big events. And it's a beautiful space.
The auditorium?
Auditorium, yes.
Okay. All right. And this is now going to be managed privately?
Correct.
But for the city?
Correct.
Okay.
With a separate board of directors. In the city council, it's interesting how our sales tax works for hotels. It's a 7% tax, which is unusual in the state of Minnesota. 2% of that is for convention bureau and that kind of stuff. 3% of that is for retirement of our debt on that project. And then 3% can go to our general budget. So 2% can go to our general budget. So that's how we get 7%.
And I'm hearing rumors that hotels would like to have an exemption from some of, is this the hotel tax that pays into the Convention and Visitors Bureau?
I've not heard that rumor, and I don't know why they would want to. I don't know how we would do that, because when Experience Rochester goes out there and promotes Rochester, they're doing it as a whole. Now, we have some hotels with some banquet facilities which compete against us, and we don't have hotel rooms, but we do have our banquet facility. So it's a way for us to make money for the city of Rochester, provide that asset. It will never make a lot of money, but it should at least break even.
Now that we're into capital expenditures, tell us what you think of the Soldiers Field track that they just voted to asphalt, I believe.
Well, I've always had an interest in the parks, and when you're out knocking on doors and talking to people, the parks touch everybody in Rochester. And so the proposal was we want to, I'll go back a little bit. We had a surplus from 2 years ago of about $3 million. We took 1.2 million of that and gave it to the park department for capital expenditures. They only had $600,000 in their budget originally. So we earmarked it $200,000 for the track, and then $600,000 for the parking lot, and $200,000 for the Kuski Tennis Center, and $100,000 for Silver Lake Park Pavilion. So they went through there, and the park board listened to the people what they wanted to do. The staff proposed that they asphalt it. The track club came and said, hey, we'd like to use a different material. We want it to be for running. It's the all-comers track meet's been down there for 49 years. It's been a track since 1920. It's not been maintained for the last 15 years because it's cinder, and they don't make cinders anymore because of coal and everything. So, you know, it's been neglected. It gets wet. Rochester Fest is down there. But I was fortunate. I was in Boston this last weekend and visited a track. And that track has a material they call beam clay. And there's a couple other manufacturers of it. But it's a product that you put down that it will stay nice when it's wet. You'll be able to use it for a track. And you'll be able to use it for festivals. And you won't have that drainage problem. Right now we have a drainage problem because they haven't maintained it for 15 years. And when it rains, it's a low spot. It's going to get water.
The Charter Commission is looking at the charter boards, which are the library, RPU, and the park department. And part of the word is that the park department is spending money on property, and they're not elected, but they're a private board. What do you think about that?
You look at the 3 charter boards, and they are in our charter, and our charter is what sets up what runs Rochester. And you're on the Charter Commission, and I believe there's 13 people on there. And they meet and they discuss our different charters. So the 3 of them, I've not been to a library board meeting. I've been probably for the last more than a year, been to the park board meetings. And what they do is that they run the park. They set the policy for the parks. They listen to their people. There's one person that's not elected, but appointed from each ward, and then one at large. And that person's responsible for listening to what the people want and telling the staff, these are our priorities, this is what we're hearing from our community, and this is what we'd like you to do. And sometimes it's hard for a volunteer board to sit there and do that, and so the staff kind of persuades them or gives them the information that the staff would make it easier. But their job is, as my job is to say, I represent the people, and this is what I'm hearing from my people. That may be easier for the staff, or this is what the staff might want. But really, I represent the people of Rochester, and that's what the park board does. It'd be very difficult if you didn't have the park board, library board, and the RPU board, because then all those decisions would come to the council. And you don't have that expertise, you don't have that time to be able to look at all those issues. Up in St. Paul, they have a park board that is elected, and they also tax. And so they have their own money, and they're responsible for that. Right now, the only control we over have in anything is we hold the purse strings. We give them their budget, and if we don't like the way that they're spending their money, well, we can always deallocate some money.
And some of them give you money back, right? Like RPU.
Well, RPU pays in lieu of taxes, and so if they were a tax entity here and paying for our easements, our easement for using our property, they would pay, and they pay, I believe, it's 7% of your RPU dollars. Now that's only the electrical portion. RPU is not the stormwater. They're not the hydrant. They're not the water guys. But we build this with the same, so RPU gets blamed for that. But RPU with just electrical generation kicks back about 7% per year.
One of the capital issues coming up is the library would like a new or renovated library. What do you think about that?
I have not heard that it's the library that wants to do that. I think that it's up to the library board. I think they need to step back and look at what their job is and see what they need to do for our community and what space needs they need. I don't know right now if they need more space. If they do, we have 2 more floors we can put on that building. It's a beautiful building. It's in a great location. It's connected to the Skyway. Some other proposals that have a 3P, a private partnership, and move it out by the VFW on 6th Street. It's not on the subway, it's not on the Skyway. It'd be hard for our patients to get to and most of our citizens. We're really lucky in Rochester to have the Skyway and the subway system. You can go all the way from Old Lourdes at 6th Avenue, you can take the subway all the way over to Mayo Civic Auditorium, which I think is a neat area for us to be able to walk through.
I'd be remiss if I did not ask you about the Veterans Museum. The Veterans and Emergency Preparedness people want a museum, and they really want it in the Soldiers Field somewhere. What do you think of that?
You know, Kevin Torgenson's been a big proponent of that, and they're trying to do it on the west side of Soldiers Field. I don't know if they have enough area to do it. I know that they're getting very frustrated with the park board on that issue. I hate to see them go somewhere else. I know Manorville's offered them a spot, but I think Rochester in that spot, if you look at, you know, Wayne Stillman and Bob DeWitts and those guys who did that Veterans Memorial, it didn't cost the city anything. There's no maintenance that goes into that. That's an absolutely gorgeous site for everything. And that's what Rochester's really good at, is volunteering and seeing a need and doing things. It's kind of like the track. The track team has come up and said, we'll give you some money. The tennis clubs guys, they raised $400,000. Our park and rec is a little unique in that we have youth football, youth soccer, swimming, all these other organizations run our youth sports. We provide some of the facilities, but a lot of communities, it's the rec people who they're rec employees, they do rec stuff, and so we have a unique way we do things here in Rochester.
Hockey is just about into the summertime, but there's just talk about hockey and the Mayo Civic Center. Anything there?
I've not heard anything about Mayo Civic Center. I know hockey's a big user of the Grand Marina, in that we want to redo the Grand Marina. We don't own, if I get this right, we do not own the building, but we are the employees who maintain the building. The Olmsted County owns that. And Olmsted County is looking at the Grand Park Master Plan, and they picked up the Seneca Food, the old Libby's site. And I don't know exactly what their plan is there. I know that the City Council has moved to have a transit hub put there, and another one on 2nd Street Southwest by Country Club Manor. And those are two places that we're applying for federal grants. We had gone out to Washington, D.C. for some meetings, and we went and we met with our U.S. Senator Klobuchar and then Hagedorn, our representative, and met with them out there and talked to them about our need for the transit hubs. And that's a 3-4 year project that we need to do.
And before we ask you some budget-related questions, tell our viewers what job you did when you were retired, so we have some idea of what your past is.
Well, I was a building inspector for the city of Rochester for 25 and a half years. And currently I am a salesman for Superior Walls, which is a precast wall company during the day. And I also work at the Dan Abram Healthy Living Center part-time, and that's where I get my health insurance. And I teach swimming at the Dan Abram Healthy Living Center. And I'm a city council person.
Okay. When you talk about the transportation hubs, how far along is that in terms of the approval process?
We have to, my understanding is that we have to send a letter to the federal government that says we're going to ask for money. And then the following year, we actually ask for the money. We have to have the details. They score it on the need in the community, the area, the people that it serves. Why do you need to have this? And they will fund that. I don't know if you know, but it's kind of interesting in our transit system in the city of Rochester. Not one penny right now of your taxpayer dollars goes to our bus system. It's all picked up by the feds and by the state.
They're looking at Center Street at both ends for people who are commuting into Rochester, and they can park on the periphery and ride a bus or other transportation downtown. And then Broadway, they have not really said exactly, but we know the county owns some land that could be used on the south part of the city. Do you think we're ready for that?
I think we're way past that. And it's not just a park and ride lot. You know, you think you go to the little cities outside of Rochester and they have park and rides along the highway, the bus picks them up, they bring them into Mayo. These are going to be Some of them will have apartments. I think all of them will have apartments built around them. They'll be able, so neighbors can walk and they can bike to that spot. It's going to be buses that are going to run about every 10 minutes. They're going to run almost 18 hours a day.
All right, now let's go to the money, the budget.
Yes.
And where are we in our budget process? Now we're almost at the middle of the year. And do you appreciate the kind of process the council has set up for its city administrator? Where are we?
Well, I do. And when I've run before, I always was the person that said that we should have a 5-year budget or a 10-year budget and look out and see where we're going to be. A lot of the assets that we buy take a long period of time. And one of them is we just approved a fire truck last night for $1.2 million. You know, and so you don't just bring that out of the taxpayer and say, oh boy, we have a big bill this year. So you have to plan. We did have a meeting back a month ago that said, hey, what are your priorities? Where do you see us, you want us to be? And so we turned that around, and last night we approved this is what we want to do as a priorities for the council. Now the departments and everybody will come back with our priorities and say, this is what it's going to cost to fund these.
And are you looking at holding the line on taxes, or do you have a maximum you can go without raising any property taxes for them?
Well, that was one of the hard things last year, is talking to people that their property values are going up. Mine went up 11%, which is a good thing for an asset, but then that also ties into your taxes, and so your taxes are going to go up. And as we grow, we're going to grow. Some of your taxes are going to grow, and some of it's going to be from new growth. They're going to pay for some of this, and so we're lucky in Rochester that we're a growing city. You know, I mentioned Duluth before, and they've lost their population. That's difficult for communities. So I'm of the philosophy that you want to grow, you don't want to die. The budget is going to increase, and the taxes will go up. And hard to say that, but I think you have to be realistic about it, and it's going to.
Let's look, well, the one thing that the state government is trying to do is to make the income taxes in Minnesota compatible with the tax cuts at the federal level, so that should make that easier.
It should, and they should have done it before. You and I probably agree on that. It's interesting that they have a rainy day fund, and they decided to raid that and take money out of that. I was kind of disappointed in that. And I see that we won't be getting a gas tax, which I think is a pretty good deal for everybody. It's such a regressive tax for the little people.
So what do you think about the compromise?
I've been in Boston all weekend. We ran a marathon. I had a friend of mine who ran his 50th state, and he did it under 4 hours. He's run a marathon in every 50 states in under 4 hours, and that's quite an accomplishment. So we were out in Boston area, and we ran a marathon, and so I didn't follow the ring roar. I'll watch Almanac on Friday and kind of get the scoop on what's going on.
Are you going to run this weekend in the Memorial Day Marathon?
We might run the half marathon. We're waiting on Sunday to see where we're going to be. I run about 40 miles a week in the city.
Okay. All right. Let's look ahead, and what do you see is going to be the biggest challenge for the city of Rochester? And we haven't said DMC yet, but give us your idea of what will be our biggest challenge.
I think to meet the needs of what people expect from their city. When they go to a park, they expect it to be clean, they expect it to be well maintained. And Rochester has done a poor job of maintaining their assets. And I go back to the library, and you know, the thread is, well, geez, the roof needs $1 million. Do we put $1 million in the roof? Well, in my budget, I budget for things like that, and I think the city needs to be doing that. They didn't do that because of they wanted to hold the tax rate down, but I think that we need to start doing smart things of budgeting for those things. And I think that's going to be the hardest part.
DMC is preparing the city for huge growth in employment. And a lot of this is expected to come from the Mayo Clinic. As you look at this growth, do you see it coming out as a good thing?
I do, and you know, I was born in Rochester in 1959, and I think we had 35,000 people in Rochester, and I know that 1963, that Mayo Clinic had 3,600 employees, and IBM had 3,600 employees, and I think Rochester is a great growing town. I think you do need to keep growing. I think DMC is, is concentrated on the downtown. They're not so much concentrated on the outskirts, and I think that that's a bad thing. You have to remember we're a regional center. 40% of the people who live in Dodge County work in Rochester. That's a high percentage.
Amazing.
That's amazing. And so, we are a regional center, and, we do have an airport. Minneapolis and St. Paul do not. The MAC runs that. They don't have a sewer plant. The Met Council runs that for them. We have a sewer plant. I mean, so when you're on the council, you have a lot of little things that you have and a lot of big things that you have. The airport, it's important for us to get our runway funded by the state with a bonding bill because we need that down here, and it will make it safer and make it that we'll be able to land our planes a little bit with more fog and be able to land them. And we have a great airport, and we need to use that asset.
If you look at the problem of homelessness, which is affecting our city as it is most cities around the country, what's your solution?
I don't know if the solution would be my solution, but if you look at what other communities have done and what we're doing, and I've talked with the mayor about it, and we need to have a center for people to be able to go to. We need to be able to not have them in our downtown. It's not against the law to be homeless. We need to be compassionate, and the citizens of Rochester are compassionate, but we do want them to live to a standard that we have. Working at the Dan Abram, we're the first stop outside of the home that they have for those guys who get kicked out because they've been drinking, and they stop by and see us, and that's not a pleasant experience. And so, we're lucky that we do have a lot of different resources. It's more of a county issue. It's a social issue. In talking with the county, that they've spent a lot of time, and they know most of the homeless people. So it's not like they don't know who or don't care. But some people just don't want to go to a shelter. And some people just can't, and they don't want to be around those people, and that's how they call them. And me being, what do I want to say? Homeless people being there, and if you're uncomfortable, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they are who they are, and 99% of them are great people, and they're just some mental illness there.
Okay, one last question. What would you change about the city as a council member?
I'd like us to be more responsive to our citizens and listen to them. And my goal would be in 3 years is that you don't have to call me to get something done, that you can just call the city, you can call up the park department and say, hey, this is a problem, and be able to handle those things. And I think Mr. Reimer's done a great job, the administration's done a great job. I think I answer my phone calls and my emails. I try in every 2 hours, and get back to people. And that's a goal of mine to do, and I'm not always going to agree with everybody, but at least tell them that I got your email and I appreciate it.
All right, now we're down to our last 2 minutes. What would you like to tell the viewers?
Well, there's a lot of neat things happening in Rochester, and we have the police department's putting on in every one of the wards, they're having a little picnic, and June 4th is ours at Silver Lake East. So I invite everybody down there. I think it's 6 o'clock it goes, and the police department's very big on that, doing that. So we want to make sure that the citizens know that. We also have art, also have music in the park. We're going to be doing that at Cook Park on July 3rd, going down there and have a little mini music concert down there. We're trying something different on the 4th of July down at the Silver Lake. This next year, hopefully we'll have that snow dump out of there, and we're going to move that to RPU, to the old coal site, so we're going to have 5 acres there. Want people to look at the long-range plan for Silver Lake Park. It's going to be coming up, and we're going to need community involvement. What do we want to see? The dam is an issue that's coming up. What do you want to see for trails? What would you like to see for the old fire station? So there's lots of things that you need to be involved with early, because we don't want to do something and 3 years later have you go, well, geez, how come we're doing that? And so we do plan ahead.
Shaun Palmer, thank you for your service on the City Council, and your background is truly going to be an asset to the whole city as you participate in all the discussions. And thank you, our viewers from Rochester and the surrounding area, and your interest in the issues that we have right here in our area. Have a good week, have a very, very good night, and we'll be with you next week, same time, same channel.